In this video, we're going to eavesdrop on some more Beatles Get Back, Let It Be sessions here on Pop Goes the 60s. Let's start with Ringo. So far, we haven't heard a lot from Ringo, and because he hasn't said a lot during these sessions, it's led people to say that he was depressed, disengaged, and things like that. But really, Ringo Starr is really tuned into what's going on here. And what I've been hearing throughout all these sessions is when John, Paul, and George are facing each other working on songs, Ringo is just falling in and out of the song as he is needed. They don't have to tell him when to come in. They don't have to tell him when to stop. He just automatically does it. And he seems to be paying attention the whole way through because he's right there with them all along. One of the things that Mark Lewisohn discovered in his research for the book Recording Sessions is that all those hundreds of takes he listened to, he said that less than a dozen of those takes or those breakdowns from any of those takes were the cause of Ringo Starr. So Ringo typically, he did not make many mistakes even when they were rehearsing. Mark Lewisohn also talks about Ringo's quiet nature during these sessions.
Ringo and Maureen talked about this probably between Christmas and New Year. He's got a family man now, he's got 2 young children at home. And he likes being around the house, and he likes being with Maureen and with the kids, and he likes to work. But he's going to be making a film in February, The Magic Christian, which he's making throughout the period we will be talking about. So he doesn't want to go abroad in January to do a concert. It's just like he doesn't want to fit it into his life. It's not suitable. When they begin at Twickenham, he's already made it clear that he won't go abroad, won't go to do this in another country. And the thing about Ringo, and you hear this clearly if you listen to all the tapes for January, is that he doesn't say very much. But when he says something, it carries weight. And if Ringo's not going abroad, it's not happening abroad. It's as simple as that. It's not happening because he's not going, because he doesn't change his mind.
If Ringo seems quiet during these sessions, there's someone else who, in the opinion of some, could have been a little bit quieter, and that's Yoko Ono. Now, Yoko Ono, we hear her occasionally chipping in some ideas as if she's a band member. Case in point is this discussion about the live show.
Stage, that is like an open air or something, and you're playing to the gods, and to the stars,
or even playing to people who have never seen you before. You see, I think you're right that any stage performance now of an ordinary sort visually will never be topped, because we all remember, and you better than I.
Okay, so what's the use of an audience?
Right,
the use of an audience is like for out of sheer charity to play to them because you love them, or for you to collect ticket money, or for to get a reaction between you for the sake of your show.
Yes.
But look, the thing is then, that's presuming that we're not enough for a show.
Yeah,
that does
that's
presuppose
very bad,
that there's not
very
enough
bad
in the 4 of us. You've really got to pan off onto a postman.
See, the whole point about
in a way, it suggests
to give you something when you're performing.
It's good and bad, really.
Right, yes, good, okay.
But also, once you get up on a stage, I think once you get up...
Well, the whole point about an audience, surely, is to give you something.
Like an actor on stage.
Bounce back,
It's a different audience.
But it'd just be all luck to get a lot of cunts in there all day.
But equally, once you get on a stage, you are performers. And you've got to have someone to do it to, of some sort, either the camera or real people, I think.
Well, empty chairs would be much more dramatic. 20,000 empty chairs.
Looks like they haven't bought any tickets.
No, but
look, the thing is, no one's going to sort of think that, like. No one's going to think they haven't bought any tickets.
No.
It'll just be they've done it to 20,000
And also, people are wondering what kind of audience you have now, And it should be like invisible, nameless, everybody in the world, instead of some teenager or something. And they say, oh, so they still have this kind of teenage audience. Or if you have costume people, you say, oh, those are the audience now. It's very dangerous, Like now you have audience in every heart in the world, you see. So it's very bad to limit it.
But we are doing 2 shows. And the one idea could be to play one night to silence, and the next night to those chairs filled.
But you see, then partly the documentary is playing in silence. I know it's not for an audience, but it's going to be the same thing.
But I think
we haven't just played. We haven't. Any number we've done at the moment, we've tried, if we noticed the camera on us, to ignore it.
But the people who are watching the TV doesn't want to see an audience unless the audience is terribly different.
That's what I mean.
That's right, but I think the audience could be different.
Formal, where queens and kings coming to see it.
The only negative thought I have.
True. I mean, they're not switching on to see the audience.
Right.
No, but they're switching on to see the Beatles certainly, but they're switching on to see either what the show is or how you react to this. I think your ideas are very good, but what I think is that if you got up in front of an empty house and played, it makes you look too rich. In the bad sense. In other words, what's the point? This is the negative aspect of that. What's the point of you getting up and playing for an empty house when you could be giving people happiness with a full house, whatever kind of full house we
nobody's going to think that. They're going to think it's a very poetic situation. And they know that the Beatles are
I think
rich.
if you get rid of an audience...
Yes, but I meant the bad side of rich.
Then there's no point in doing a live performance. It's like going into a recording studio and doing one take.
Unless it's because of the backgrounds, George, you see. Unless it's now we're going right the whole circle back to...
The audience is definitely going to give you something.
I'm not against Albert Hall. I just think it slightly smells of a few years ago. The Shea Stadium, there's wherever there has been.
All right, say anything, and it will slightly smell like either a few years ago or less than a few years ago, because they topped it. They topped
exactly,
it all
unless it was a location.
Yeah, that is so strange.
I'm not particularly supporting this idea, but it is an idea that we can then say no to and go away from if we can top it. But it is a location which is marvelous in itself by the sea.
But look, that has to be in England. An outdoor scene has to be in England. Because we've decided we're not going abroad.
I don't think...
Then we ought to
never get that together, that would be like half-assed idea.
Or totally assed. The thing is, then we...
Not really,
Because if I were in New York and if I watched Hey Jude, that program, TV, I would think... My interpretation would be that those people around them who were sort of climbing up and starting to sing with them and all that were just hired people, If I think that, then it's okay. But if I thought that they were true audience, then I think, so now people don't think of Beatles as too much, because all the image that everybody in the world has about Beatles is that once if there's an audience, they're going to be frantic and pulling their clothes and tearing it away and all that.
The good thing is that we can completely create another image. Create and preserve the image of your choice. Yes. So if we can just think of an image how we'd like to be, and then we make it that one, which could be anything. We could just be like a nightclub act or anything. Just the smoochy low lights and about 10 people.
Now, in this case, Yoko Ono, her background is multimedia shows, they're happenings. So I think in this case, she is giving some, it may not be wanted opinions, but she's got some good ideas. Paul McCartney, through a lot of this, is supporting Yoko. He wants to make sure that John feels that Yoko is accepted, and Paul is making excuses for Yoko. And the others, particularly George, Neil Aspinall, and maybe a couple of the others, maybe don't feel the same way. Yoko Ono talks down to a couple of the people such as Michael Lindsay Hogg, and she tends to offer opinions when she's not asked. The other thing that she gets railed for, I think, is she joins the Beatles on a jam on a couple different occasions. Here's what that sounds like. Now that jam you just heard was just after George left the group. So the Beatles partake in this kind of wild jam and Yoko starts doing her thing. But this seems to change once they get over to Apple. Once George is reinstated and they get over to Apple, the old stories that Billy Preston was brought in and that made everything all better. That's a little too simple to be true. He was there part of the time. He wasn't there every day. They were doing well when he wasn't there. Everybody seemed to realize we got to get this thing done. Ringo Starr had a shoot scheduled for the Magic Christian movie in 2 weeks, so they had stuff to get done and they came ready to work. So at this point, Yoko is not chiming in as much at Apple. She did join in one short jam again, which sounds like this. Now, one of the other things Yoko Ono is accused of is, and she was accused of this by George Harrison, is that they were angry at Yoko because she got John involved in heroin. Now, John is a grown man, and he can make up his own mind for himself. I don't see how you can blame Yoko for that. She did introduce him to it the prior summer, around the White Album time, and they seemed to go on and off of it. Hard to say when they were on it. There's an example in the Get Back, Let It Be sessions where they do an interview that retroactively was called Two Junkies, where John is a bit sick. Now, typically, I hear writers and bloggers and podcasters just basically say about John Lennon during this time, he's high on heroin. He's strung out on heroin. That's the answer for everything. Well, if you look at 1969, he's got some really prolific stretches there where he's extremely productive. So it's not likely he was on heroin constantly. And during these sessions, the only time he seems to be really in bad shape is during this interview.
Something to change the world for the future.
John, does it bother you at all that your songs are taken on so many different levels as far as interpretations are concerned?
No, because they are on all those levels, you know. Excuse me, I feel a bit sick.
Right.
You know, they work on all levels.
You can make it. John, since you've kind of undergone this particular renaissance, which I think is a pretty good word for it.
Very nice.
And you realize, that the amount of power that you can exert in the music world.
Yes.
And just generally in the world, period. Has it affected the way, your lyrics are coming together, what you're trying to say?
No.
Now that you know what you've got.
No, not... Because this power thing that we're supposed to have is this sort of abstract thing. And the only time we ever try to sort of say we're aware of this power, we're trying to do something with it, was with Maharishi and the meditation thing.
Now, generally, from this whole month, John Lennon, there's times when he is quiet, but there's nothing that suggests that he is incapacitated and can't work. He generally is being, even at Twickenham, he's being his old funny self, joking around. Sometimes he may not be taking things as seriously maybe as he should, but generally speaking, he's pretty social, and heroin is an antisocial drug. By the time they get to Apple, he's there to work, and he's pretty dialed in.
So I think it's very easy to be frightened obviously of the word heroin and its potential, and to assume that John was strung out on heroin the whole time. And it's very evident that he was not. No. He's far too creative and lucid. Doesn't exhibit any signs whatsoever of being strung out. In fact, in Twickenham, I think it's the 14th of January, it's the last day at Twickenham, John begins the day with an interview set up the day before with Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And John is kind of green in this interview, and he's clearly unwell, and in fact he goes off to throw up. And we know that he's thrown up because he comes back and says, I've just thrown up. And then he's a bit more together, his speech becomes a little bit unglued. And at the end of that day, he says to Paul and Ringo, because George isn't there, he's quit at that present time, he says to Paul and Ringo, I took something last night I shouldn't have done. And if you look, the day before, they've had this, in all the Ethan Russell photographs that we have of that shoot at Twickenham, there's a picture of some guys around the Beatles, and one of them is Tony Sanchez. Now, he was Keith Richards, he was heroin supplier to the Stones. And he turns up on the 13th of January, and that night they do heroin, and the next morning John is green, and then he throws up. So there's a clear chronology there.
During these recordings, John and Yoko make references to heroin. At one point, Yoko suggests it's like exercising. The shooting heroin can be like exercise. So they make light of it here. And I don't think the others were really aware that they were using anything like that. I'm not sure about that, but they weren't using it in the studio. And the reference I have for that is this book by Joe Gooden called Riding So High, The Beatles and Drugs. I think I'm going to do a review of this book because it's an excellent book. Well, that's it for this video on more Beatle narratives during the Get Back, Let It Be sessions. I've got a couple more videos coming along these lines, so stay tuned. I'm really having a lot of fun doing these, and I'm I'm getting some really positive comments, so I'm going to do a couple more for you. One of the books you may pick up in the meantime is Get Back, the Unauthorized Chronicle of the Beatles' Let It Be disaster by Doug Sulpy and Ray Schweigert. I'm going to put a link below in case you want to give this a look. And great book. It's essential to understanding a fuller picture of what really went on during these sessions. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know when I have a new video coming out. Hit that like, leave a comment, and share this video with somebody who you think might appreciate it. Thanks for watching Pop Goes the 60s.